Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 878. I wanted to play the Reti opening, so I started off with knight f3. And we actually got it. He played d5 here. I've been seeing a lot of other moves, like knight f6. You see the top choice often transposes into an English. But this is the Reti. And then, well, d4 you can transpose back into a queen's pawn opening. But c4, this is Reti gambit if he takes it. He can also just defend with c6 or e6, or he can push on. And I think pushing on is probably the best choice. You know, white is offering black the opportunity to get more space in the center, and black should probably take it. And you know, why not? There's no big penalty here. That pawn is well supported, so it's not coming under fire. But it gives white some time to complete this setup. So it looks a lot like a Benoni with colors reversed, and we're going through a lot of fairly normal developing moves here. I guess there was one point I wanted to mention here. At the point when I played bishop to g2, you can see actually the top choice is e3. And I always wonder about this, whether I should play e3 before I move the bishop. You know, that pawn could come forward, and then maybe the queen would come out and round it up. So it's not likely that that pawn can come forward, even though it's supported by the queen. So it seems like that's a possibility there. But anyway, bishop g2 is also a normal way of playing. He goes knight f6. I go d3, stopping it, and I'm going to play e3 later. Goes knight c6. So this is good play by black, and doing the normal stuff. And then bishop g4 here is a bit unusual. So just to show the typical line, I guess, let's go with e5 here, e3 to undermine the center, bishop e7, exchange to open this up. And now you can really see this Benoni pawn structure. We've got a nice diagonal for the bishop, supported by these two pawns, but black has a lot of space. And so it's kind of a double-edged position, and interesting. And bishop to f4. This is one thing I wasn't sure about, but it seems bishop f4 is the better square for my bishop, rather than going bishop to g5. And now knight hopping into e5. And play would continue. This knight might come out to a3, another idea I wasn't particularly aware of. I'm not so familiar with this system. I just learned it from watching Chess Explained, who plays it a lot. And so I'm still in the process of learning the normal moves here. Anyway, bishop to g4 is, yeah, we're just out of the opening book here. And maybe it's a little bit slow because I kick it and it drops back. If he didn't intend to trade for that knight, or stay on the king side here in some way, maybe retreating to retreating to h5 is a possibility, I guess. You know, it's now black is kind of a tempo down on that line we just looked at. It follows a very similar pattern, and we see we get the same structure, but I'm like a move ahead because this bishop went here. The bishop went here, and then it dropped back, and this h3 move is useful for me. It keeps pieces out of that square, so kind of gained a tempo over normal lines. At this point, I threw in rook e1 check. It seems like that was okay. And then I went bishop g5. I was tempted by the idea of taking here while the bishop is pinned, but of course he can just castle, and he did. And it doesn't really accomplish anything to have the bishop there. I mean, eventually I trade that bishop off for the knight, but that did not seem to be the best for me. So bishop f4, following what we saw in the main line. It seems to be that's the best move here. The chess engine likes it. And after castling, continuing with knight to e5. So similar kind of play, and leaving the queen side undeveloped for the moment. It's kind of interesting. So anyway, after bishop g5, I think, well, I have to say the chess engine likes black all along here, probably because of the extra space. But after bishop g5, the advantage to black becomes more pronounced, and particularly after knight bd2. So it seems like I'm playing a few moves here where they're just not the best moves for this system. So let's see, e castled, I went knight bd2. Knight a3 is the suggestion, trying to do stuff on the queen side. I went knight bd2 because I was tempted by this square on e4. And I do get to that square, but we see there's some problems. Anyway, he kicks the bishop, and I'm a little short on squares, so I trade it off. And that was kind of my plan anyway. And it goes with this knight e4 idea. You know, I'm gaining a tempo and kicking the bishop back. And I thought this was pretty good. But, well, developments later in the game showed that that was not really so great for me. In fact, this f4 move was kind of annoying, and he got a pretty good attack going on my king side, which also has been a bit weakened by that h3 move. There's now one fewer pawn supporting the pawn on g3. So all in all, that knight e4 idea was not best. And a3 is the suggestion from the chess engine. So I think the idea here is just to keep my pieces back. Also, instead of knight bd2, a3 could have been played as well as knight a3. But I think the idea is to more or less keep my pieces back, push the pawns forward, and then maybe bring my pieces out on the queen side behind the pawns, and keep pieces off of this diagonal so my bishop can operate, and just try and get more pressure on the queen side. I think that's a more logical plan with this opening choice than the way I was playing. But just kind of shows that I'm unfamiliar with this opening setup. Anyway, he went bishop to e7. I went queen b3. As I was saying, yeah, I'm bringing my queen out in front of the pawns instead of behind them. And it's a little bit awkward keeping... what we see is he gets pressure building on the king side. My queen is maybe a little bit out of play there. He played queen c8, defending his b pawn and lining up over here. I played king h2. I wasn't unhappy about this. King h2 was part of my plan anyway. But after he played f5, I began to realize that I am in a bit of trouble. This knight doesn't have anywhere great to go. It just goes back to d2, so I've kind of wasted the tempo there. And this pawn can come forward with a great destructive effect, which black prepares very logically with bishop d6. And, you know, I start to try and organize some kind of defense here, but clearly black has gained the initiative at this point. So some combination of the moves, knight e4 and bishop g5, you know, just indicate that I'm playing on the wrong side for this opening. Anyway, so yeah, so I'm in trouble here, and black, I think with good play, could go on to win this. Let's see, I go knight g1, he went rook b8. Bit overly cautious, I think. He didn't really need to play that. But I guess he's looking forward to pushing that b pawn at some point. He wants it off that diagonal. He also wants to move the knight. So it's a logical move. But the immediate f4 is probably more dangerous. I could bring my knight back to e4, helping to defend that g3 pawn, and hitting his bishop, so I gain a tempo that way. And you know, I was thinking I could park this knight back on f3 now. Well, let's follow this for a while. It just shows some of the attacking ideas, and it leads to a very strong position for a very strong position for black. So knight e7 to bring it around. Let's see, rook to f1. I want to try and bring my rooks over here to the f file and the e file. Knight f5. Now he's got two pieces ganging up on this pawn, and I've got the knight and the king defending it. But let's see, I bring the rook over. These aren't necessarily the best moves for white. They're just kind of what I was thinking. And after bishop to c6, it seems my position is completely falling apart. Basically, the pretty simple threat here is just to take off that knight and then grab on g3. And the way I've played, and notice my queen is out of play over here. You know, I just have no defense against that, and black should go on to win. Now, there were better defensive tries, but they were maybe somewhat more difficult to find. Anyway, he went rook b8, so he gave me a little bit of time, and I played f4 to try and stop these ideas with black playing f4. Although this is still good for black. Black still has a winning attack here, and he could push forward immediately with g5. That's the strongest move here. But he's keeping an edge with rook f6, so black is probably winning through all this part of the game. Let's see, I bring my knight out. He plays queen over to c7, piling up pressure on this diagonal. I go rook to e2, wanting to defend along the second rank, potentially a double too. He goes king h8. I'm not quite sure what that was about. Maybe he was still thinking of pushing this pawn forward, and if I take, he didn't want that to be with check. But really, his prospects lie over here on the king side. Oh, the other idea may be he's just preparing the g file for his rook to come behind the g pawn and push the g pawn forward. That would be pretty logical as well. Anyway, it gave me time to double my rooks here. But like I said, he's still doing well through all this part of the game. He plays b6 finally, so he doesn't have to worry about this diagonal because his rook has evacuated it. And I went knight e5. Now this lands, well, I was just going to say the chess engine thinks queen d1 perhaps is a better defense than knight e5, but all these moves leave white struggling. He took off this knight, but I won that good bishop, so I've eliminated one of his attacking pieces, so I was starting to feel a little better. And then he went rook to g6. Maybe a bit misplaced there because it's actually blocking that g-pawn. One of his ideas should really be to push that g-pawn forward, and if he had just played rook to e6, well, the chess engine at this point would play rook to f8, and also with the idea of, I assume, g4, g5 and f4, or maybe just f4 directly, and just continuing with the kingside attack. And this looks like a pretty strong attack for black. So rook g6, maybe all these moves are not quite precise. They give me a little bit of time to maintain and organize myself, although I think black is still keeping an edge here. And let's see, he went rook e8 here, piling up on the e-pawn. I went queen c2, so I'm now thinking about getting my queen back to help defend, although there was a move here. Let's back up. Knight h4 was an interesting move that I was thinking about. And actually, at this point, with knight h4, I would have equalized. So this was a chance to kind of get back in the game that I missed. But knight h4, actually, I think I thought about this move a little bit. And then bishop here. And the rook drops back to maintain pressure. But actually, this is a problem. What I didn't see is that now there's this knight g3 move. And knight g6 move, and that's a fork. So that's how I get back into the game. He still has some pressure, but it's looking a lot better for me after that. So I missed that chance. It's not too deep. I think I should have been able to spot something like that. It's like two moves that are kind of forcing, and then there's a forking square that opens up. Anyway, queen c2. He goes knight b4. Oh, yeah, bringing the knight over here to harass my queen. I drop back. He goes bishop to c6. I go a3, kicking the knight. And then his next move is a blunder. If you want to, f4 is the chess engine's recommendation here, just pushing forward. So if you want a little tactical quiz, why is this move, bishop takes f3, a blunder, and what can white play against it? It's another thing. It takes a couple of moves. Just follow it and look for tactics for one or two moves. See if you can spot the idea. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. It's a tactic I missed during the game, which at a point when it was even more obvious. But he took, I took, and now there's actually two threats in this position. I'm threatening his knight, but I'm also threatening this skewer, and that's the tactic I missed in the game. So when he dropped his knight back, I should have just played. I mean, he's going to lose material at this point anyway. That's why bishop takes f3 was a mistake, because after the natural recapture, he's just in a position where he's has no good answer. It's one of those cases where I was more worried about my defense, and I was just getting rid of that nasty knight so I could hold on to this passed pawn. But I just had a better move here in bishop to h5, skewering those two guys. Anyway, I didn't. I took off the knight, and so now we're back in the range of about even. So his advantage that he had has dissipated with his, he was just a little slow slow in following up the attack. And let's see. Oh, well, I do give him one more chance here. I played Queen C1, and he had a very strong move here if you want to look for it. Okay, he could have played Queen F3 with the double attack, right? He's threatening to take that pawn with check, and that would also win this pawn, so I pretty much have to defend it. But after I defend that pawn, he can take this pawn. So what's the Queen F4 was the recommended move. Yeah, bring the queen out to defend the pawn, but then he can just grab over here, and that's winning for black as well. So I missed that idea. You know, I could have just played a rook move here. I could defend the pawn. There's plenty of moves that keep it in the range of about even. Anyway, I went Queen C1, and he went Queen E6. He didn't take advantage of that one chance, and so we're back to even. And it stays that way for quite a while. So this is like heavy piece maneuvering. It's tricky, but it seems like we both did okay in this part of the game. It just stays around even. And so we'll just go forward. This was a long game. Even this exchange, I thought this was helping me out, but I had to give up a pawn to get a pawn. The material's even, and he still has enough play to hold the draw. So I felt like I was making progress here, but it's still an even game at this point, even after I grabbed this pawn. But this move is the move that gave the game away. So it was that Rook H7 move that allowed the trade. So just to show how we could hold this and why you want to keep both rooks on, especially with my exposed king here, gives him some counter chances. So say rook here, I might try pushing my pawns forward. He can check, drive my king this way, and then he can attack this pawn. And if I try to defend it, he can bring the other rook down. Well, he gives a check first, and then plays the rook here. And there's no way I can. My best move here is to trade, and then he's going to grab this pawn. And you know, both our kings are a little bit out of play, and the material is even. And it should be a draw from that point. So that's how he could have drawn it. Instead, he went Rook H7, going to a rook and pawn endgame that is losing. And the reason it's losing, I mean, you may have heard that 3 pawns against 4 pawns all on one side of the board is a draw. And that's true in general, but in this case, his king is cut off. And that makes all the difference. And I played this reasonably well here. I never really gave up that winning advantage. I managed to hold on to all my pawns and keep his king out of the way. And I just need to activate my king. And it's worth giving up this pawn to activate the king, because now with his king cut off and my king attacking the pawns, I do manage to to simplify to a winning rook and pawn endgame. So when I grab this last pawn here and block his king, and it's all because his king was cut off to start with, that he couldn't get over in front of the pawn fast enough, that turned out to be a win. So a very interesting game with things going on in all the phases. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you later. Bye.